It was an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind where peace settles over the house like a soft blanket. After a long day at work, I collapsed into bed, exhaustion pressing me down into the mattress. My name is Evelyn, a single mother of 8 years. Life had been simple, quiet, and predictable until that night. My son, Ben, had already gone to bed after a typical evening of video games and half-hearted homework attempts. At 19, he had grown into a thoughtful young man, the kind who carried too much weight on his shoulders. Sometimes I worried he took on responsibilities that weren't his to bear, especially after his father left us. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and let the moonlight filtering through the curtains lull me into a sense of security. My body melted into the bed, my thoughts slipping away, until a soft knock at the door jolted me awake. "Mum?" Ben's voice was a whisper, tentative and quiet. I stirred, blinking against the haze of sleep. "Ben? What is it?" My voice cracked with drowsiness. He stood in the doorway, a faint silhouette against the dim hallway light. "I couldn't sleep," he murmured. I sighed, propping myself up on my elbows. "What's wrong, honey? Did something happen?" He hesitated before stepping inside, closing the door softly behind him. There was something in the way he moved, a careful uncertainty that made my heart ache. "Nothing happened," he said, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to be close to you." His words hit me unexpectedly. It had been years since Ben had sought comfort like this, like he used to when he was a little boy afraid of the dark. I patted the space beside me on the bed, offering him a place to sit. "Come here. You can stay if you'd like." He climbed onto the bed cautiously, lying down next to me. For a moment we just lay there, the silence of the room wrapping around us. I glanced over at him, his face half lit by the faint glow of moonlight. He looked tired, not just physically, but in a way that spoke of emotional weight. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked gently. He shook his head, his dark hair falling into his eyes. "No," he said softly. "I just needed to be here. With you." My heart softened. I reached out, brushing the hair from his forehead, the gesture instinctive. "That's okay," I whispered. "Stay as long as you need." Minutes turned into hours as we lay there, the rhythm of his breathing slowing until I thought he had fallen asleep. But then, in the faintest voice, he spoke again. "Mom, do you miss Dad?" The question startled me, though I knew exactly who he meant. The weight of the past settled over me like a heavy quilt. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But things weren't good between us, Ben. You know that." He nodded but didn't look at me. "Do you think things could have been different? If I had been better?" My chest tightened, the words hitting me like a punch to the gut. "Ben, no. None of this was your fault. Your dad's choices were his own. But maybe if I had tried harder," he whispered, his voice trembling, "maybe he would have stayed." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached for him, pulling him into my arms. "Oh, sweetheart, no," I said, my voice breaking. "You were never the reason he left. You've always been more than enough." He resisted for a moment before relaxing into the embrace, his face buried in my shoulder. I held him tightly, feeling the years of guilt he had carried begin to melt away. His breathing slowed, becoming steady and deep, but I stayed awake, my mind racing with memories and emotions. The next morning arrived too quickly. Sunlight crept through the curtains, pulling me from a restless sleep. Ben was still beside me, his face peaceful and free from the tension that had weighed him down the night before. I watched him for a moment, my heart swelling with maternal love. But beneath that love, something else lingered, a warmth I couldn't quite name. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake him, and headed downstairs to make breakfast. As I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, my thoughts drifted back to the night before. Ben's vulnerability had been so raw, so open. It stirred something in me, a protectiveness, yes, but also an unspoken connection that left me both comforted and unsettled. Ben appeared in the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He looked younger in that moment, his hair tousled, and his frame slightly hunched as he sat at the table. "Morning, sleepyhead," I greeted, placing a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Morning," he mumbled, digging in without hesitation. The golden sunlight streaming through the windows bathed the room in warmth, creating a bubble of tranquility around us. We ate in comfortable silence, but I could feel his gaze on me now and then. Finally, he broke the quiet. "Thanks for last night, Mum," he said, his voice low but sincere. I really needed that." I smiled softly, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "You don't have to thank me, Ben. I'll always be here for you." As the day wore on, the house settled back into its usual rhythm, but the air between us felt different. There was a warmth, a quiet intimacy that hadn't been there before. It wasn't something we talked about, but it lingered in the glances we exchanged, the way our conversations seemed to stretch just a little longer. That evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, the tension became almost tangible. Ben sat closer than usual, his arm brushing against mine whenever he shifted. I tried to focus on the screen, but the awareness of his presence was overwhelming. Halfway through the movie, he leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mum, are you okay?" I turned to him, startled by the question. "Of course. Why do you ask?" He hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "I don't know. You just seem different lately." My heart raced, the weight of unspoken feelings pressing down on me. "I'm fine, Ben," I said softly, though my voice lacked conviction. The days that followed were a delicate dance. We moved around each other carefully, our routines unchanged, but the air between us charged with something unspoken. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment of closeness brought on by his vulnerability. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about him. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, our hands brushed while passing a plate. The simple touch sent a jolt through me, and I glanced up to find him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Mum," he began, his voice steady but quiet. "Can we talk?" I nodded, setting the dish down. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, his eyes darting to the floor before meeting mine. I feel like something's changed between us." My pulse quickened, the truth hanging heavy in the air. "Ben, I paused, struggling to find the right words. "I think we've both been through a lot lately. Maybe we're just leaning on each other a little more than usual." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Maybe, but it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like something more." The room seemed to shrink, the space between us charged with electricity. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he reached out, his hand gently brushing against mine. "Ben," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I care about you, Mom," he said, his eyes locking on too.